Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of College Hockey Talk. On today's podcast, I'm joined by UNH freshman Charli Kettyle, who is coming off her first year in college hockey this year. Welcome to the podcast, Charli, and how's everything going?
Everything's going good. I'm sad that freshman year is coming to an end, but it was a good year.
That's good to hear, and thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Now, what have you been up to, since the season ended a few months ago?
Well, I wasn't able to go home during the season at all, so I went home to Canada for 3 weeks in April, came back, and I'm just finishing up my classes.
Yeah, and what's the situation like in Canada? Because I know Ontario is pretty locked down for the most part.
Yeah, so I'm from Ottawa in Ontario, and it's not fun there. Like, everything's in lockdown. So I'm not very excited to go back for that part, but I'm glad I get to see my friends and family.
That's good to see and hear. What are your off-season plans, heading into next year? What do you hope to work on regarding your game?
Hopefully a lot of off-ice training, just getting bigger and stronger, faster. On ice, I want to work on more D-specific skills and skating.
Now, talking to other players in college hockey, they're telling me how much of a challenge it was to prepare for the year prior because of all the gyms that were closed and the ice time because it was very limited. Do you
Yeah.
expect to face those same challenges again this offseason, and how do you plan to overcome those challenges?
As of right now, I do plan on expecting some challenges. Um, I don't really know how to overcome the on-ice challenges because I don't own my own ice, but I do have like a gym at home, so I can always work out there.
And is it hard not training on ice, preparing for the upcoming season? Because then you head back to UNH, you're going to be back with your teammates in the ice. You're not really having that on ice training compared to some of the other teammates. So how do you plan to adapt to that?
I'm not sure yet. Would much rather being able to go on the ice, but I know some girls don't go on the ice that much in the summer, so I'm not that worried, I guess.
hmm Now, I want to transition and talk about the beginning of your hockey career and work all the way up to where you are now with UNH. You're from Perth, Ontario. How did you start playing hockey and falling in love with the sport?
So my brother, who's 3 years older than me, he played growing up, and I loved going to the games and watching him. So then I started. I started in boys hockey in Perth, and then eventually I got to the age where it was hitting. So I transferred to girls hockey in Canada, and then went to Kingston for a year. Ended up in Nepean, and yeah, that was basically my career.
Now, who was your favorite player growing up?
Um, well, I guess other than my brother, it was Drew Doughty in the NHL.
Nice. Do you try to model your game after his?
Yeah, and
Nice.
Eric Carlson.
Nice. Now, before UNH, you played for the Nepean Wildcats in the PWHL, like you were just mentioning earlier. How did you get the opportunity to go to that organization after playing a year in Kingston?
Um, so the Nepean coach. So I had a friend on Nepean, so I was talking to her, and she just loved it there. And it was closer to home, so I decided to reach out and see if I could play there, and I went there.
Now, talk about your experience in the PWHL and what was your favorite memory with Nepean overall?
My favorite memory with Nepean would be getting second silver at the Naha tournament one year. And my favorite part about PW, even though it was a lot at the time, was honestly the travel. I got to see like a lot of different places in Ontario. I also got to meet a lot of girls. Yeah, that would be the best part.
Now, how did your experience with Nepean help prepare you for college hockey with UNH?
Well, my coach was very, very good. Like my coaches in Nepean were very good. Um, and they got some of their drills from UNH from other colleges. So just practicing those drills helped to prepare me to get here.
Now, you also played for Team Canada in the 2020 Under-18 World Championships. What was the process for getting selected on that team?
So the Hockey Canada coaches will come, or sorry, not coaches, scouts will come to games throughout the year, and they'll watch you and give you feedback, give your coaches feedback. And then I got invited to go to Calgary, which was a selection camp in August. And then that November, I got a call saying I made the U18 Worlds team to go to Slovakia.
Nice. And what was going through your head when you got that phone call that you're going to represent your country?
Oh God, nothing and everything at the same time. Like it was so overwhelming. I was in tears.
Where were you when you found out? Like, were you at your house or were you at school or like, where were you when you got that phone call?
I was actually in the change room of my Nepean locker room getting ready to go on the ice. And right before I went to go out of the locker room to go on the ice, my phone started ringing. And it was like an unknown number. So I was like, oh gosh, like this might be it. So I had to take it.
Nice, nice. And even though you won a silver medal in that tournament, just talk about getting the chance to play, represent your country, play in that tournament. What'd you learn from that entire experience overall?
I learned a lot. Um, I learned a lot about resilience and just keep going no matter what. It was some of the hardest hockey I've ever played. So just like not only being in the games, but like watching from the bench too. It was like I learned a lot.
Where do you keep that silver medal?
It's in my house, hanging up.
Nice. And how cool is it? Do you ever show it off to any of your friends or people that you know, just because it's a really cool accomplishment to have?
When I first got back, people were dying to see it. Like I had to bring it into school to show some classes and stuff.
Nice. And also another thing I want to ask you was what was going through your head when you got to put that Canadian jersey and represent your country? Like how much of an honor is that for yourself?
Again, it was a very emotional experience. One of my good friends was like my stall buddy, so we put it on together and we just hugged each other right after.
Nice. Now, what was it like playing hockey in Slovakia? And was there any cool things you got to do in that country when you were down there?
We didn't have like a lot of time to go out and visit, but we did have some family time, so I got to go with my parents and see some sights and stuff. But the hockey was pretty well the same. It was just cool to say I was in Slovakia.
Nice. Now, talk about your recruitment process and what was it like? When did UNH start showing interest in yourself, and just what was the process like for making it to the UNH hockey team?
So UNH reached out at I think it was the start of my junior year of high school, and I came for a visit that November. Loved the coaches, loved the rink, loved the campus. Stayed in contact, and then I believe I committed in that December, January of that year. Unfortunately, I could never come for an official visit because of COVID, but I just knew like I loved UNH.
And what was the biggest adjustment you had to make to college hockey this year? Was it the speed of the game, or was it just the mental side of the game, making quicker decisions with the puck?
I would say both, and also the size and strength of the girls. Like coming from PW to playing against like 21, 22-year-old women was an adjustment.
And what part of your game improved the most playing your first year in college hockey?
Um, I think probably the mental game for sure actually was grew the most, especially with the COVID year. Like we just had to learn to just keep going through anything.
Yeah, I want to talk about some of the challenges your team faced this year because of the pandemic. You had a lot of different schedule changes throughout the year, a lot of
Mhm.
postponements and changes with regarding your schedule. How did you like mentally stay prepared for all those postponements that happened, and what was the key for maintaining flexibility for this year?
I think the main thing was just to practice, and every practice like we were going to play no matter what. Our coaches always reminded us like even though our game got canceled Monday, we could be playing another team by Wednesday. So we just had to go into every practice acting like we were playing that weekend.
Now, how did you prepare for opponents this year, not knowing who you were going to play until the Tuesday before the weekend?
We just had high tempo practices all the time, to be honest. Like we knew what drills and what worked for us, and we would just do that.
Now, was it an adjustment not playing in front of any fans, and what was that like, not having that crowd noise?
It was a bit of an adjustment, especially not seeing my parents in the stands because they would always come to my games. I know some schools we went to like had the fans, the noise in the background, so it felt pretty normal. But not seeing the faces was weird.
Yeah, and you guys had those cardboard cutouts in the stadium too. Did those make a difference at all? Some players say they did, and some players say they didn't really notice them.
I'm gonna say they did because looking at least some faces was a lot better than just looking at a million empty seats. Especially because our rink is so big, it definitely made a difference.
Yeah, and talk about how excited are you to play in front of fans, hopefully next year, and what's your first celebration you're planning to do once that crowd's back in Whittemore?
Well, I'm very excited to see everyone. Celebrations, I don't know. I'm not very good at those. I don't know, to be honest. Just bang my stick, I guess.
Nice. Do you plan to jump in front of the student section or anything like that? Because I know some players like to do that.
I would. I'd probably fall, but I would try it.
Awesome. Well, once you get your first goal next year and there's fans in the stadium, we'll definitely reference this podcast when you jump in front of the student section, and we will say that I called it and that you predicted it right here.
I would love that. That would be awesome.
Now, something that was introduced to college hockey this year was 3-on-3 overtime. How did you adjust to that, having more space on the ice and having more offensive opportunities to score goals?
I loved it. I'm a very offensive defenseman, so like being able to just interchange positions was so fun for me, especially on our ice because it was so big. That was my favorite time, to be honest.
And what's apparently talking to other players about the 3-on-3 overtime situations, you have to be a little more defensively minded because if you make one little defensive mistake, it can cause an odd man rush. Is that something you've noticed when you were part of them?
Yeah, yeah, it's true. Just like if I'm the only Dion and I bobble it at the blue line, like that's on me. So
Hmm.
I did have to be smart about it. But if I knew like my teammates could cover me, I could go up. Like that was fun.
And what was the key for having puck possession throughout those 3-on-3 overtime situations? Because you want to keep the puck in your own zone so you can create line changes for your team, as well as creating offensive chances and sustaining that offensive pressure in your own zone.
Um, what that was on would try to take it behind the net, or we would just try to create a lot of space between us and the other team's players. And we could just like if there was two on, they would just pass it, or we would do like escapes, and it made it pretty easy to change.
Now, Whittemore Center is one of the biggest hockey rinks in college hockey. What was it like playing in a much bigger ice surface, and how was that adjustment like for you?
It was really fun, although very challenging, especially when it got to the third period. Um, yeah, it was hard on. It did get hard on the legs during games, but I loved having the big ice.
And what's the transition like, I guess, going from Whittemore Center to playing at a much smaller ice surface the next game when you had those series?
It's like sometimes I wouldn't notice it, but then other times like I would try to make a pass and it would get to them so much quicker than before. Like I would try to skate it and the other team would be right on me right away. And it was like I'm used to having more time. So that was frustrating. But sometimes I liked playing in the smaller rinks too. Just depended.
Now, in the regular season, your team had some success. You beat the number 8 team in the country in Boston University during the beginning of the year. Then you also beat one of the best teams in the country, Northeastern, in a shootout during the regular season as well. How important are those type of wins heading into the hockey's playoffs?
Oh, so important. Like those were the highlights of my year for sure. And like just having that confidence going in, being like, we beat the best. Well, I guess Northeast was the second best team. Like we could beat anyone as long as we stuck to the gameplay.
Yeah, and just talk about winning in that shootout against Northeastern. What was your reaction when that shootout goal was scored?
I don't know if I've ever been more excited for a win. Like I was the first one at the door, so I jumped onto the ice. I went up to Padrian who scored the goal. I absolutely jumped on her. Like it was awesome.
Now, I want to talk about the hockey's playoffs that you were just in. What was it like being Holy Cross on home ice? And just talk about the positive momentum that game brought to your team heading against Northeastern the next weekend.
It Getting that first win under our belt in the playoffs was very important, especially in our freshman year. Like I didn't want to lose in the first game. And then going into play, I mean, the game didn't go our way, but just having that win was very important.
Yeah, and I guess like watching that game, your team did a great job with those zone entries, and then you got those two quick goals in the first period. And how important were those two goals heading in that game? Because then you guys could just basically defensively lock them out throughout the rest of the game.
Exactly. Getting those two goals, putting us up, we were just able to like focus on defensive play, and obviously we still did offensive play, but we just didn't have as much pressure.
Now, you unfortunately lost against Northeastern in the playoffs. Talk about that game and what do you think could have happened to make that result better? Because in my opinion, the score didn't really reflect on how close that game actually was.
Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, it was we did play better. at times when we like let off the gas a little bit, that's when they capitalized. So I think just minimizing those times and not letting them get up as early would definitely, it would have been a different game.
Now, how was playoff hockey different from regular season hockey in your experience?
A lot more physical, a lot more grit. Just you can tell who really wants it. Um, yeah, a lot of more drive to score.
And how did you adjust to that physicality? And do you think hitting should be allowed in women's hockey, in your opinion? Because do you think it'll make the physicality easier to call for the referees because they don't have to have like a line of what's a body check or what's not a body check?
Yeah, that's a good question. Sometimes I think yes, because we're already like very physical anyways. We might as well have body contact. But then other times, like there's such a size difference in some girls. I think I don't know. I sometimes I like that there's no hitting,
Hmm.
but I think it'd be fine if we added it in.
Now, I want to ask you about some of the teammates you get to play with. The first teammate I want to ask you about is Lindsay Dumont. Just talk about the leadership that she brings to your team and what you like as a teammate, both on and off the ice.
I love Lindsay. She's one of the funniest people I've ever met. Just like always positive, always bringing people up, always making people laugh. Like I love it.
Now, another teammate I want to ask you about is Rihanna Brooks. Just talk about what she's like as a teammate, both on and off the ice, and just talk about the goal scoring ability that she has as well.
Yeah, so she's my roommate. So we got really close this year. She's a very good teammate. She would do anything for you. Her goal scoring ability amazes me sometimes. Like she just knows where to be at the right time. She was like I played against her at PW and she was like that too. Like you just knew when you were playing against her. Yeah, she's a great teammate.
Now, the last teammate I want to ask you about is Avery Myers. She's another great goal scorer on your team. What's she like as a teammate, both on and off the ice as well?
She is also very funny. Like you're gonna laugh if you're around her. It's yeah, I really like Avery. Her goal scoring ability also amazes me. Like sometimes I don't even know where she is, and then all of a sudden I see the puck go in the net. And I'm like, oh, it's Avery. Like she just knows where to place the puck. It's fun to watch.
So we're now in the segment I like to call the non-hockey segment of the podcast, where I ask you some non-hockey questions. My first non-hockey question to you is, if you could have lunch with anyone in the world, who would it be and why?
Oh gosh. I think I would go to lunch with Kevin Hart because he's very funny and I love him.
Now, if there was a movie made about your life, who would you want to play yourself?
I would want Melissa McCarthy to play myself because she's also very funny and probably my favorite actress of all time.
Nice. What is your biggest pet peeve?
People that chew with their mouth open. That is by far the biggest pet peeve.
What is the hardest class you have ever taken so far at UNH?
I think I'm gonna say a class I took last semester called Death and Dying. It was just stuff like tough things to think about.
I would not want to take that class. That seems
No.
like they just like give you like what do you even learn in that class? Just different ways to die, basically.
That and like the nurses, like I don't want to be a nurse, so I don't really know why I took the class. But it's like how to treat people that are at the end of their life, like palliative care and stuff. It was so sad. Like I cried a lot during that class, just watching movies and reading.
Yeah, that's a tough one to take. And
Mm-hmm.
who is the funniest teammate you have at UNH?
Tamara Theris.
You obviously have the best style on the team, but besides yourself, who has the best style on the team or on UNH?
I'm gonna say Ray Breton.
Now, who is the best trash talker on the team, in your opinion?
Oh gosh, I don't know. Maybe Siobhan Schroeder.
Nice. Did she ever cause any penalties? Because I know sometimes that happens if the chirping gets pretty good.
I don't think she caused one because of chirping, but I think she did get one or two from like pushing after the whistle.
Oh, nice. Now, another last non-hockey question I want to ask you is, what music do you like to listen to before a game?
I listen to rap mainly all the time.
Nice. Any go-to artist?
Yeah, there's a few. I really like a Boogie with the Hoodie, Lil Wayne, Tory Lanez, Bryson Tiller. They're probably my favorites.
Which arena had the best warm-up mix, in your opinion, besides Whittemore, obviously?
I remember the Boston College one stuck with me. Like it was just you just got on the ice and it felt like you're in a different world, mainly because of the music.
Nice. Now back to some hockey questions now. What should be done to help grow women's hockey in your opinion?
I think there's a lot that can be done to help grow women's hockey. I really hope it starts growing quicker. Um, I like the fact that the NHL is starting to support it more. I think that's a really big step to take.
And what was your reaction to the World Championships being canceled and then rescheduled sometime in August?
Very like my initial thought was happens. I was upset. I was sad for them. Like even though I wasn't there, it just broke my heart knowing that they were there, ready to play other countries, and they just got sent home out of the blue.
Yeah, I know, and with no backup plan too. That's like I think that's what makes it even more worse in
Yeah,
my opinion.
yeah,
Now, what advice would you give a younger player?
yeah, exactly. Because I mean,
Oh, sorry,
sorry,
the
what was the
internet.
last question?
The internet got cut out there. What were you saying?
Yeah. I just said especially because it was in Nova Scotia, and they knew that they're like very strict on COVID. So it was disappointing to see they didn't have a second option.
Now, what advice would you give a younger player trying to pursue a Division I college hockey scholarship?
Some advice I would give to a younger player that I wish I was given is there's going to be girls that commit a lot earlier than you. Like I was in grade 9 and all these girls around me were committing, and it was very like discouraging thinking like, "Oh gosh, I'm never going to make it. I'm not as good as these other people." But the advice I would give to the girl is just everyone goes at their own pace. It's like you just got to keep pushing.
Now, do you have any shout outs you'd like to give to any of your teammates, family members, or friends? Anyone that I might have forgot to mention in this podcast?
Um no, I just all of them, I guess. So it'd be a lot of names.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Charlie. I really appreciate it. I wish you all the best in this off season. Take care, stay safe, and I just want to let you know that you're one of my favorite players to watch in Hockey East, and I can't wait to see you play again next year.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. This was really fun.
Now, one question I want to ask you before